Hello friends, welcome back. In this video, I will show you how to master the EF Core using the model first approach. From writing models, configuring relationships, using EF tools to build clean web API endpoints. Whether you're new to EF Core or just need a solid refresh, this hands-on walkthrough will help you get production ready fast. So come, let's get started. I opened up the Visual Studio 2022 and I'm going to choose the ASP.NET Core Web API. You can filter it from here and I say next. I choose the project name and the location and I'm going to click next, and here I'm going to choose 9. As of this recording, .NET 9 is standard. I'm choosing that and everything is default. Create. Okay, so the default template project has been created, but before we step into the Entity Framework Core, first of all, what is EF Core? So Entity Framework Core is an ORM, Object Relational Mapper, that's for the .NET, and it lets you interact with databases using C# or objects. Avoid writing raw SQL, though it is possible that if you wanted to do so, but it also handles the schema evolution via migrations. Okay, so what is code first then? So code first is nothing but you define your schema in C# classes, and then the EF Core generates the database based on those models, and you manage the schema changes using your migration. So that is what it is called the code first approach. There are pros and cons for the code first approach. Pros, it's a full control in code. It's great for agile and startup project, easy to version and manage via Git. It works well with small to medium projects. But here's the important thing for the cons. The complex DB requirements like custom constraint, computer columns, advanced indexing, these are the things that gets harder to define purely in the code. And in large legacy DBs, managing from code can become really messy. So it really depends on your use case when to use the code first and the database. In this video, we will still go ahead and check the code first, and in the next video, we will talk about the database first approach. Alright, so let's do one by one in this. So the very first thing is, first let's install the package. So right click on the project, manage NuGet package. It will show up on the browse. Choose Entity Framework Core, Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. And there's only one package, and if you choose this, you see there's billions of downloads, so it's widely used. So as of this recording, 9.04 is the one. I can install this. So once I install this, we have other packages to install. So but one thing what you should know is, any package that you install here will actually come and sit here. Whatever you install is coming in and sitting here, right? So now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put a bunch of information here, and when I put it is 9.0.0, basically a few version earlier, but I can update this. While you get the code, you will get the latest one. Okay, so all what you have to do is, you need to install these packages, and these packages are mainly with Entity Framework Core, Design, and SQL Server, because we're going to use that as a SQL Server. Alright, remaining these things are for the Swagger. So once I save it, and if you do a Control-Shift-B, which will build the project, and if everything is correct, the project will build. You will see a succeed message here. See, you got the build succeeded. Now let's do one by one. The very first thing that we need to do is, we will create a folder called entities. Okay, here, entities. Now listen to me. And now, just for your information, because this is just a demo on model first approach, we will not be having layers of project, but everything under one single monolithic application. But I have enough videos that shows good architectures like clean architecture, CQRS pattern, and all of those things. These things should go in those kind of patterns, but this is just for learning purpose. So everything is going to be in the single project. Do not do this for the real-time project. Okay, this is absolutely not correct. It's only for sample application, just for learning purpose. So we have an entities folder here, and what we are going to do is, we are going to deal with student versus course as the simple entities. So in order to do that, I am going to choose so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a file called entities. So I'm going to add a file and we'll name this as student. Alright, so now we added a class called student.cs. Now imagine this, right? Every single class objects, like every single object here, is representing a table in the database. So in our database, which we are going to create, we have a table named student. So every table will have columns, right? So we define the table columns in terms of properties. All the properties here becomes the column name. So student ID, full name, date of birth. They're all of different types. And the reason why you have to put the table name followed by ID is the EF core will automatically determine that this is the primary key of this table. If you name ID, it will still consider, but if you name something else, you need to manually define what is the primary key. If not, the EF core will not be able to find out. Now, we have a table, we have 3 columns in it. Okay, now let's define another table called course quickly. So let's define a table name, which is the object name as course. And in this case, again, we will define a property called course ID that becomes a primary key. And what we will do, we will define another column called course name. Okay, so this is done. So now what we are going to do is, we are saying every single course, or in other words, a student can enroll in a course. So if that is the case, if that is our design, then a student will have its course ID, to which course he or she has been enrolled. So one student can go with only one course. That's the logic. That's why we have course ID. And we can also define a course. Okay, that's for the navigation purpose. Alright, so course ID, that is corresponding to this course. So far good. Now if every student is associated with one course, alright, what does mean? A single course ID can have multiple students, correct? There are 10 students enrolled in different courses, or let's say 5 students enrolled in one course ID and another 2 students enrolled in the same course ID, which means one course ID can have more than one student, right? So when you have to do such kind of thing, the navigation, we will define something like this. So we will say I collection of student and we'll name it as students. So this will say one course ID can have multiple students enrolled in it. That's the logic. So we have saved this. We have these 2 tables, are nothing but the tables. So we have these 2. Now what we have to do is, we need to define a context. We need to define the entity framework, right? So right click on the entities, add a new item, and we will say class, and we will name this as school context. Okay, so now in order to make this as a DB context, what you have to do is, this has to be inherited by the DB context class. So DB context. So if you say DB context and control period, will ask you where to pull the namespace. So DB context is coming from entity framework code. So I pulled up, right? Now what we will say, instead of telling that we will provide option in the constructor, DB context option, and that will be passed to this base class. So when I say base of option, this option is provided to this one. Okay, so the option will have connection string of the database and all of those things, like all the SQL related configuration will be there in the option. Now we define that. Now what you have to do is, in order to make the table accessible, see, the moment I enter, it is already showing in the hint, public DB set of student, and student here, let me do a tab, it came. So basically all the tables has to be of DB set. So DB set of student means it's a table that you're defining, and then see the other one. So if you define these 2, then when you access this context, you can access these 2 tables. Okay, so that's the concept. If you don't have this, you cannot access this from the entity framework school context. Okay, so every table should be here if you are fully utilizing the EF core. Now these two is done. Now there is one more thing that we have to do. There is a method called on model creating. Okay, so if I say protected override void on model creating, basically you're overriding the on model creating a class, a method which is inside this. Okay, so if you don't override, it is going to execute its own logic, but we are overriding and executing our logic also. So if I say control F, see, it's here. This is invoked automatically, but we can override and write our logic. So what I'm going to write is, I'm going to show you how we will define the, so I'm going to show you one simple thing, this one, right? So for student, we are saying it has only one course with many students. Course ID is the foreign key and foreign key name. If you don't say this right, the foreign key will be still created based on the configuration which is here. Okay, this is the foreign key configuration. This is primary key, this is foreign key. Why it is foreign key? A primary keys is present in another child table, that becomes a foreign key. Course ID, if you go to course table, course ID is a primary key here. So this primary key is present here as a key, which means this becomes a foreign key. Now, in order to just define the foreign key as a named constraint, we are using this model builder. Okay, so I've defined the named constraint and we will save this. Okay, so far good. We have few more things before we get into the EF Core tools. Now, very first thing is I wanted to set the configuration done. So if I go to this development environment, I'm saying connection string db context. I'm defining my connection string. See, today I don't have this table. Okay, so you can just name whatever table, I mean the database name that you want. So let's put this one, right? So let's put this as model first. Okay, this is a database name which is not there. How do I show you? If I go to my localhost, refresh the database, there is nothing called model first here. Okay, so we are defining a name which is not there, and then we define everything else, nothing else is there. This is pointing to the local database. So now this is done. Let's go to this program.cs and we will configure a few simple things. The very first thing that you need to do is the configuration of database. So I'm saying builder.service at db context name. We're saying pull the connection string from here, and we are enabling the logging, we are enabling the detail error logging, we're also enabling the retry logics. Okay, so everything is done, so far good. And I'm going to quickly add the remaining piece of logic here that is not relevant to this one. So basically I'm going to add the Swagger endpoints here so we can debug it easily. So this is done. Okay, so now what I have done is I have just added a readme file. So next is we have to install the EF Core tool. Okay, so you can follow this readme.txt. Basically you need to install this. Okay, so try this command first. So go to this command prompt and try this command. If this command shows you some value, see for me it shows the latest version that is installed. But if it is not installed, it's simple. You need to use this command .NET tool here .NET tool install -- global EF Core. Okay, so if you have installed and if you have a lower version, how do I update that? You can simply use .NET tool update and this command, right? So this command will update to the latest .NET Core EFC 0.9. Now if I use the previous command, it's going to update it. All right, so that's it. So you can follow this based on the clear instruction here. You need to first install the EF tool. Now let's say you have installed the EF tool. How do I know? I mean, how do you know, right? So what you do is right click on this, like, basically you go to this location. Maybe I will say explore folder and file. It's here. I will click here, command prompt. I'm basically opening this location in the command prompt. Okay, so here what we will do, we will say .NET EF. If you type this, if it is installed, it will show you like this horse kind of thing, EF and then horse and then all of these things. And what you need to understand as part of this video is EF, .NET EF is a tool, and it's a command line tool, CLI tool. It has three major commands: database, DB context, migration. So for example, .NET EF followed by database. If you type like this, under database, what and all commands are there, it will show. See, drop and update. Okay, so if I type DB context, what will happen? See, these many commands are there inside that. So that is what it will show. And the last one is migration. Migration, if you type, it has its own commands. So let's start what is required for the model first approach. I'm going to say clear so that it's easy to look at here. So we are saying .NET EF migration dash add. So if I type here, what it says, add, right? So .NET EF migration add. You're asking the tool to add a migration, and you're also saying a migration name, the first name, initial, let's say initial code or initial draft, and then it just starts calling us saying, hey, I couldn't find the project. So basically, if you get this kind of error, you need to say dash project. Okay, you need to specify where is the project. So let's go here. We have opened the tool, we have opened the command line from at this point of time, right? So what we will do, we will have to go here. So basically we are opening from here. So we have to say the project is here. So this is the project, right? So it's just one step above. So let's open up the tool that we were using, project dash, and then we will say the project is here. Let's try this. Okay, if everything is correct, if the project is correctly it's identified, then it will tell like this. Say it's building the project. Once the build is success, it will be able to create a migration for us. See, the migration is done now. What does that mean? You got a folder called migration, and then this is what the migration is. So based on how you defined here, right, the course, students, and all of those things, it created migration for us. See, it automatically created the course ID as identity column 1,1 and name as envarchar max. What does that mean? You can have the course name up to 8,000 characters, but that's incorrect, right? Incorrect meaning we don't need to have such kind of a space. Okay, so this is a snapshot. Everything is here. It just created everything for us. But let's say I wanted to define a proper schema. So in this case, I'm saying the course name is just a required property, and then its max length is 50. This is called data annotation. You're defining the constraints of the columns here in the model itself. Similarly, if I go to the students, and we can define the similar one in the name of the student. So we go here, we define this. Now what do? We will do the same thing, but here we will say first draft. We are going to create a second one, like the new one. So once we have this, now based on the current models that we have defined, it will create a new migration for us, which is first draft. Okay, so now we have two migrations. What we will do is we will do one thing. So we will say .NET EF migration, or in other words, we have to do .NET EF database update, and then we'll remove this add. So this is the command .NET EF database update. So once you do this, what is going to happen? It is going to build the project. See, it is generating all the required schemas, and it will push to the database. So let's go to database, refresh this, and here's our new database, tables. So let's expand this, columns and students, and look at this, whatever we applied has gone. 50, 100, the first one took over it. And if you look at this one, this is very interesting one. This is a new table that is not in our list, but it will apply both. Okay, so first it would have applied this, which was having envarchar, and then it applied this, which restricted to envarchar 50. First one was max. So how do I know this? Let's take a look at this. So if you look at from upright, it would have first got this table. Alright, so it is clever enough to find out what is optimized, and finally it created such a script, and it applied both the migrations together. Alright, so this is for the first time. Let's say in some times, right, after some time, as per the business requirement, all of a sudden instructor concept comes into picture. So for example, if I have to add a new column called instructor, new table called instructor, so I will add this. So instructor, why do we need instructor? Basically instructor, a course will be done by an instructor, right? So that's why an instructor is associated with the course. Now if you go to course or in students, okay, so in students what we will do, we will add another column, a new column in student called email. So I will use this as email here. Okay, new column. Now these two are the changes, right? Now if we have to go to this DB context, and what we will do in the DB context, we will add this new table here so that we can access this. Okay, so we run this, and that's it. What we will do, we will add one more thing. Again, same thing for the foreign key. We are defining for instructor in giving a named foreign key. Now let's repeat whatever we just did so that you understand. So here I'm going to clear this. We are going to say database migration add. Here we will name this as added instructor, just for understanding purpose. Okay, so we are adding a new migration, and you can clearly see based on this new table and other schemas that we changed, it is going to build and generate and add a new migration. And if you go to that specific migration here, it will just add the extra column for the table and the new table. Those only are there in the changes. Okay, so now we will say .NET, same thing. So we need to update the database. So we can say .NET EF database update. We don't need to specify the schemas. We can just specify the project and say enter. So what will happen? Now it will generate the remaining changes. It actually knows what changes were applied, what changes are pending, and it will actually update the database based on that. So if I go to database now and do a refresh, what will happen? I will see a new table here, and I will also see a new column here called email. See? Okay, and not only that, if you run this, you'll see the third one getting applied here. So that's how the entity framework tracks all of this information. Okay, so now what we will do, we know how to add the migration and all of those things. Let's do one more thing important. So .NET, okay, so same thing. So I'm gonna make use of this, but here instead of database, we will say .NET EF DB context. So we'll say .NET EF DB context. We will see all the options. So we have these options, right? So now what we will do, DB context, we will use a script option. So if you use a script option, see, it clearly says it's going to generate the script based on the DB context, and then we will specify the project. Let's see what happens. So it reads the migration and it will generate the table script. See, this all table script. Okay, so 1 2 3 tables, and then we have all of this primary key and all of those things properly done. You can actually copy this and execute it. You will still be able to create the database. So we are learning the important commands that is there under the EF Core tools. So we learned the script under the database, migration, DB context and migration we added, we removed, and then we did other things also. But in this itself, if you see info and list, right? So basically, if you say info, basically it's going to say read your details and tell what DB context information it knows. So it's going to tell us the school context. See, it says we have the database name like this. It's a SQL server. Source is this, and this is what the options that was provided. Similarly, what else? Info, and then we have something called, what else we have? List. So it's going to list down what DB context do we have, and this time it's going to list down the school context. Let's see school context. If you have multiple contexts, it will list down multiple contexts under the single project. All right, now we know how to do all of this model first approach, and remaining things are easy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste a piece of code in the controller here, and then I'm going to also add a model here. Okay, I'm going to explain you quickly. So whenever you use this entity framework, right, generally, not just entity framework, generally speaking, you should never expose the entities directly to the customers. So in order to do that, what we have to do is, say for example, we have three controllers: course controller, instructor controller, student controller. Let's take a look at this. So for the course controller, okay, we are injecting the DB context. Let's say we have an endpoint called get course. We should not expose this course directly, context.course. Instead, we should have the DTOs, data transfer object. Okay, so what it is doing is basically, it is having its own property. It could have a different name as well, but not every single column is exposed. Okay, so we should always have the DTOs like this, and then we should make use of that. So here again, this project is monolithic project. Do not use this in the real world. This is only for demonstration purpose. So in this course controller, we injected the school context. We can access the EF core like this. So db context dot course. So if I say dot, there are three tables, right? Course table will come, student table will come, and instructor tables will come. So we are saying dot course, you select everything, but we are mapping it. So dot select is the inbuilt method. We're saying select and you map into this new course DTO, where you assign course ID to course ID, name to name, and make .toList async. .toList async is a asynchronous EF core operation. Okay, so every single method will have asynchronous and synchronous. If you don't use async, it's called synchronous method. Okay, it's better to use always asynchronous. And once you have this awaited for the result, you're sending the result. Okay, so here focus is on model first approach, and I will cover all of this query stuff in the last third video. But just for your walkthrough, we have similarly the course DTO is the one which is getting accepted as the input. We convert this into course, we add this to course, we call save changes, which will generate a new insert statement, and it will insert into our database table. Okay, that is what it is doing. One thing, just remember, entity framework is not thread safe, so you cannot use multiple things in parallel. That's why we always use await here. Okay, and one operation at a time. There's a different way of doing asynchronous, but it's one operation at a time. Okay, similarly we have instructor controller and the student controller. This is only for demo purpose, and if I run this, what will happen? The application is going to start, and we will have a fully functional demo application with three different controllers. See, it's starting. Let's see what port it is running. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23 24 25 26 27 28 29 30 31 32 33 34 35 36 37 38 39 40 41 42 43 44 45 46 47 48 49 50 51 52 53 54 55 56 57 58 59 60 61 62 63 64 65 66 67 68 69 70 71 72 73 74 75 76 77 78 79 80 81 82 83 84 85 86 87 88 89 90 91 92 93 94 95 96 97 98 99 100 101 102 103 104 105 106 107 108 109 110 111 112 113 114 115 116 117 118 119 120 121 122 123 124 125 126 127 128 129 130 131 132 133 134 135 136 137 138 139 140 141 142 143 144 145 146 147 148 149 150 151 152 I'm going to click this, and where is that? It opens like this, but then you can say Swagger and it loads all of our controller, right? Great. So if I execute this, right now there is no course, so you will not see any data coming up here, which is fine. But if you add a course like this, for example, .NET Core EF, execute, it's gonna add, I got the result. You can see it's a 201, right? Similarly, you can actually play around with other controllers also. Focus here is to understand how model first works, how migration works, how all of those .NET EF tool commands are getting used. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, share this with your friends, and if you have anything specific, let me know in the comment section. I wanted to tell one more thing. I created this mainly for one of our subscribers, so if you have anything in your mind, don't forget to drop it in the comment section, and soon your video will come alive. Alright guys, stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next database first approach video. Until then, signing off, Karthik. Bye bye.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tech tutorials. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified when we post new videos. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Happy coding!